I feel like I just got punked reading this book. Was everyone else in on the joke but me? But before I get to that, hey, my name is Frank. Welcome back to my channel where I talk about all things bookish. So before I get into the video, as you can see, I have a different filming setup. I'm not entirely sure if I like it yet. Obviously, this is my little reading hobbit hole. This is where I actually read books and watch movies. And then the room that I was filming in previously was actually my bedroom where I kept the majority of my books. But I finally got a bookshelf for this room, and this is my physical TBR for the year. It's a bit ambitious, but we'll see. Anyway, so yeah, this is kind of like a trial situation. I got tired of the sun blasting me in the face every single time I wanted to film. So here we are. Anyway, today I'm going to be talking about Rachel Gillig's One Dark Window. I want to disclose that if you enjoyed this book, then you will probably not like this video very much. And that's okay. There's no issue with that. I'm going to try to be as respectful as possible, of course, but honestly, this book just had so many flaws that I found it very difficult to move past them. So let's get into it. Now, if you haven't read this book, I'm just going to throw up a quick synopsis, but this review is going to be done in the style of assuming that you have either read the book already or you do not care about spoilers and maybe being kind of confused as to what I'm talking about. So, the first chapter was rough, dude. It was pretty hard to get through. I'm not going to lie. The opening scene itself, where she's running through the forest because she's trying to evade the physicians that came to her aunt's house. That wasn't too bad. That was literally the opening scene. But whatever tension was built up in that moment was completely lost during the chapter break where we are brought to present day. I was so disoriented reading it, and the author just gave so much useless description and exposition that ultimately it was irrelevant and jarring. When you start any fantasy novel, it can be pretty overwhelming because the author is doing their best to just bring you into this brand new magical world. And I get that, but this was not that. There was just so much frivolous detail. And I didn't find it immersive at all. If anything, it did the complete opposite, and it was just pulling me right out of the story before I even had a chance to get into it. It was very disrupting to the reading process. She describes several types of trees and the color of their leaves, the fluttering birds, the juicy, sticky berries, and the stains that they left on her fingers, the sharp taste, the crawling ants, the muddy road, the cobbled stone, the carriage hurrying by, the sound of hooves, the splashing of water, children crying, women shouting, etc., etc., etc. Mind you, this is literally within 4 paragraphs that she's giving all that kind of detail. It was relentless. And I reiterate, this was the first chapter. This is when we're meant to be getting an idea of the world and everything like that, but not so much the literal physical world necessarily, but the type of atmosphere that we're in. And I did not find this intriguing at all. It made me want to put the book down. I don't think that this description served the purpose that it meant to. And I feel like those pages, those opening first few pages, could have been utilized better. I really did want to put the book down and give up reading then and there. And you may be asking yourself, you're like, okay, Frank, well, if you hated it so much, why didn't you just stop reading? That's a good question. I'm going to answer it. My sisters and I have a little book club, and this was our book club pick. So had this been a book that I had just decided to read on my own, I would have DNF'd it on page 5. But because my sisters and I had agreed to read it, I reluctantly trudged on. I will say, to be fair to Rachel Gillig and her writing, the exposition does mellow out quite a bit as the book goes on. It really was like this first chapter just hit me in the face like a ton of bricks, and not in a very emotionally overwhelming, oh my God, what's happening kind of way, but more like, oh my God, what's happening? Why do I care? Why are we here? What does it matter? Because again, it just doesn't serve any purpose. All this description, it's nothing. It means nothing. It's trying to immerse us in a world that I feel we just could have done it literally any other way and it would have been better than what that was. That's my opinion. That's how I felt about it. I just, like I said, the first chapter could have been edited down by a lot. So we keep on reading and we learn about Elspeth's cousin Ione. We learn about her wicked stepmother and her two half sisters, that, she doesn't really get along with them. Okay, great, cool, pretty standard, being introduced to a few new characters right off the jump. That's fine. I had no issue with that. Their characters do show up a few times throughout the book. Mostly, like, I'm referring mostly to the stepmother and her sisters. And I did feel like when they did appear, they didn't really offer anything to the story. They just kind of were placed there almost like just as an obstacle to Elspeth. They interrupt her conversations out at these public gatherings quite a bit. That's pretty much the only time they're utilized. Which is, did I love that? Not necessarily, but does it actually matter in the grand scheme of things? Also, not really. They're not main characters, so they don't really need to have a very fleshed out full personality or any clear goals and objectives. They are just kind of like side characters that exist to create some kind of tension in the book. Fine. It's okay. They don't really need to serve that big of a purpose, I suppose. And this is where we learn about the Equinox Festival that the king holds at Stone Castle every year. Even though there's 2 equinoxes every year, but anyway, it doesn't. Maybe there's more than one. I don't know. The way it was phrased made it seem like he has this one Equinox Festival every year, so I didn't get that because there's 2. Anyway, again, whatever. I'm not gonna get too hung up on plot holes in this video because then we would be here for a very long time. I am just going to say that we learn Elspeth has not attended this festival in a few years for various reasons, mostly because she's trying to avoid her family, her stepmother, and who's kind of like a huge bitch in this book. And yeah, nothing really noteworthy outside of that. Now, in chapter 2, we do get a little bit more backstory about how she became infected with this magical fever. We learn how she touched her uncle's nightmare card and absorbed the monster on the card. We learn later on that that's not who that was. It was actually the Shepherd King's soul. But anyway, this is what we're led to believe at this point in time. And we get information about her magic, or I guess I should say the nightmare's magic, because her magic is basically to just absorb the powers of the cards, whereas his magic is way more substantial. And we also learn that she can ask him for his abilities. She can borrow his magic from time to time when she needs his help. She can run faster, she can get stronger, she can see in the dark, all that kind of stuff. The writing here wasn't really too one way or the it was standard, it was fine. I did like the little riddles at the beginning of each chapter where we're learning more about the magic behind each of the cards. That was cool. But again, this wasn't the best writing I've ever read in my life, and it doesn't need to be. Not everything needs to be the best thing ever. It's just for the way that people talk about this book, I was expecting something kind of mind-blowing. But hey, that's my fault for not managing my expectations. Anyway, so then the chapter skips ahead, and at the end of chapter 2, she is attacked in the woods on her way home by these 2 highwaymen who are kind of interrogating her about her position in her uncle's house. She lies to them, tells them that she's actually just a maid, and they're like, "You're fucking lying." And it's like, how would y'all even know that? How would they even know that she was lying? But whatever, maybe she's just a bad liar. I don't fucking know. Anyway, and the chapter kind of ends there with her kicking their ass. She borrows the nightmare's magic and she completely wrecks these 2 dudes, and you're like, okay, fair enough. Right? Fine. That's cool. I thought that was fine. It was, Chapter 2 was a bit more redeeming than chapter 1. I'll give it that. Like, it did feel more interesting than chapter 1 did. Now I'm going to go ahead and skip to the Equinox Festival because for the first 50 to 60% of this book, there are only two noteworthy events. Everything else just felt like filler. It was dragging, and I was bashing my face into the wall. It was so relentlessly boring for the first 60% of this book. So the only times that I actually cared about what was going on in the first 60% was kind of during the Equinox Festival, and then again when they are stealing the Iron Gate card. So in reference to the festival, the captain of the Destroyers, Raven, discovers that Elspeth is infected with this, and of course we're meant to be like, oh my god, no, not the captain of the Destroyers, but of course we're like, this is her love interest, so it doesn't really like there was no tension there. It didn't. I wasn't like scared for her. I wasn't worried that something was going to happen because of this discovery. If anything, I was just like, okay, sure, naturally. Very formulaic, whatever. So he brings her into his family's plan to collect the deck and cure the blunder of this magical mist and to help his brother Emery. And of course, she is reluctant. She's like not 100% sure at first, but then she's like, yeah, of course, because that might mean that she gets to cure herself of this infection that she's had for the last decade or so. So, okay, fine. Now, here's my issue with all of this. Despite the fact that Elspeth is theoretically the main character and the story is told from her point of view, she feels like a side character throughout the majority of this book. She has no goals, no motivations of her own. Even in the beginning of the book, her like the most prominent part about her character is that she has latched on to her cousin Ione. So after she moves on from that, because Ione gets engaged to High Prince Hoth Rowan, she then just globs on to Raven and his family and their goals and their ambitions and their plans. It felt like her character was just being carried through by everybody else. I found most of these characters to be shallow and rather uninteresting, but hers was probably the most disappointing because she is the main character. Like, I was expecting a bit more from her, to be honest. Now, if anything, I love Elm. I thought he was really cool. He had a lot of, good moments throughout the book. And then, of course, the Nightmare was the most intriguing part of this book, hands down. He had wit and humor and a compelling backstory, while Elspeth was just like kind of there, dude. Like, she didn't really like her existence was rather pointless, I want to say. Like, I don't know, I just didn't like it. So anyway, during the festival they all come up with a plan to have Elspeth go stay at Castle U under the guise that her and Raven are courting each other, because they needed a reason for her to go stay with his family so that they could like actually hunt down these cards. And at some point during the festival, she learns that Raven is infected, and she throws a giant hissy fit in front of all these witnesses on the dance floor, because that makes sense. It would have been funny almost had it not been so annoying that she was so bothered that he lied to her. Mind you, they've known each other for literally 2 minutes, okay, in the book. Like, like, why would he tell you? He had no reason to explain himself to her and to divulge that information. Not to mention that she was also lying and keeping mega huge, gigantic secrets from him that she proceeded to keep until the end of the book. She didn't even tell him. He found out on his own in a fucked up way. I'll grant you that. It was pretty fucked up. But like, why are you mad? And Gillig does try to address this pretty soon after this moment, where she kind of frames it as like Elspeth realizing that the reason she was probably so mad at Raven for keeping this information was because she was also doing the same thing. And she was mostly actually mad at herself for doing the same thing. Okay. So then why did you have to throw this huge dramatic moment in the middle of the dance floor in front of so many people? I just like I thought that was really annoying and strange that she would like, I don't know. Maybe I misunderstood that moment, but it was weird. Anyway, moving on. Now during their courtship, they've made it back to Castle U, and then literally the next morning, Raven immediately goes back to Castle Stone because again, he's the captain of the Destriers, which we'll hear that phrase 9,000 more times in the book. And so he says, he comes back at some point and he says some lame shit along the lines of like, pretending to court you has been the easiest part of all of this. Yeah, buddy, I'm sure it is. Because you literally haven't had to do it yet. Am I tripping? Like, what are you talking about? You guys have known each other for 5 minutes. And like, this would have been more believable if Raven had actually been staying at Castle U with Elspeth, but he spends the majority of their courtship at Castle Stone. They have not attended any events or had to pretend in front of any guests at the time of him saying this. They have not had to actually pretend that they're courting each other aside from that one night at Equinox. Otherwise, they haven't even really been together. So of course, yeah, courting her probably does seem easy because you're not doing anything yet. And then by the time they do actually like have to like pretend to court each other in front of guests or in front of other people, they have already admitted that they kind of like each other for real. So it's not really pretending at that point, is it? I know as a reader, we're meant to care about their relationship. We're meant to care about this romance. But I just didn't. I did not care at all. There was nothing about that. This didn't scream yearning to me. This didn't scream slow burn. If anything, this was just like, you guys find each other hot and you want to boink. Do it. Like, who cares? You're adults. Like, there's no, like, just admit it. Just say it. Like, this is, anyway, it was annoying. It just all felt like nothing. It just felt like nothing. I was like, why should I care about these two people and their annoying ass relationship? Anyway, so yeah, I really didn't care about it until like the last scene of the book, weirdly enough. Now, moving on to the other major event that happens in the first 60% of this book, and that is their plan to steal the Iron Gate card from Wayward Pine or whatever his first name is. I can't remember, William Pine, something like that. Now, this whole scene was good until it wasn't. The tension was there, the buildup was there. They put on their highwaymen outfits and they go and they're waiting for Mr. Pine's carriage to show up because they know from his daughters that he carries this card on his person at all times. Now they have this elaborate plan and you're like, okay, we're with the shit, we get it, we're on board. But when the moment comes, they realize that there are like an additional 4 or 5 carriages full of people with black horse cards, aka destriers. Instead of them being smart and aborting mission and deciding like, hey, maybe we should just follow this guy around for a few days, wait till he has a moment alone, or learn his habits, do it the smart way where we're not putting all 6 of us in jeopardy to fight all these 30 fucking well-trained dudes. Raven decides that it's a great idea to just pursue their original plan. Fuck it. Who cares who gets hurt? Who cares? We have to get it now. We have to get it now. Again, I'm not sure why, because they have about 3 months, which is when the king is planning on making his sacrifice or whatever, the next equinox or some shit. So like, not sure why they couldn't just take a couple weeks to like regroup and reorganize, but whatever. We needed to keep the story pushing, I guess. Super annoying on Raven's part. I was super pissed about that because again, it didn't make sense. It didn't seem like a pretty level-headed decision that you would want from your leader. So whatever. Outside of the fact that it was just a stupid risk, one of my main gripes was that Gillig often wrote action scenes in a way that made it seem like she forgot to include certain things. She just neglected to include essential moments in these like fight action scenes that left me very confused as to what had just happened. It felt like a character could be standing on one end of the room having a conversation, and all of a sudden, in the next sentence, the character is on the completely opposite side of the room doing something completely different, talking to somebody else. And you're like, wait, hold on, how did we just get from this point to that point? Like, where did I had to keep rereading certain things, and I was like, I feel like I'm like missing giant chunks of my book or something like that. Now, this happened a handful of times throughout the book. It was very confusing, very disorienting. And I'm going to go ahead and read you a passage in particular as to what I mean during this specific scene where they're trying to steal the Iron Gate card. So, my father scowled. He pivoted, shifting his dagger back behind him. Fucking highwaymen, he said, preparing to throw it at me. And I knew he would not miss. I'd come all this way only to be killed by the man who 11 years ago had risked everything to keep me alive. Help me, help me, help me, help! I cried, shutting my eyes, the vicious sound of the singing blade buzzing through my body. Salt filled my nose. I felt as if I'd fallen beneath a sheet of ice. I gasped, desperate for air I could not taste. Pain ripped up my arms, the dark magic of the infection and the nightmare's strength swimming through my veins. When I opened my eyes, the world was bright and vivid behind the nightmare's gaze. My father stood before me, fearsome. A small touch of surprise edged his dark scowl, and his dagger tightly fisted in my hand. Now, when I read this for the first time, I was so lost. Eventually, I figured it out, but reading through it the first time, I felt so stupid. I'm not gonna lie to you. I was like, damn, am I too dumb to be reading this book? No. I mean, maybe, but I just felt like I had missed a huge piece of what was happening. Now, reading it out loud like this, it sounds like it makes more sense, like obviously reading it out loud. But when you're reading such an electrically charged scene like this, I feel like a bit more clarity would have been helpful. The first two times I read it, I totally missed the vicious sound of the singing blade part of this sentence. I was so focused on the sensation of the magic taking over her body and the fear that she was feeling that I glitched out on the fact that Eric had thrown his dagger, right? Because we didn't see it. She didn't even see it. All she heard was the vicious sound of the singing blade. That I don't know. Now, sometimes when you especially when you're writing action scenes, you don't need flowery prose. You don't need these flourished, embellished sentences. You need clear action. Because just because you as the author can envision something in your mind, you need to be able to articulate what you're seeing in your mind's eye to your reader. I shouldn't have to like puzzle it all out when I'm reading an action scene. Now, she could have literally written something like, before shutting my eyes, I saw the dagger flying through the air, the vicious sound of the singing blade crashing into me, or something like that, right? Or, like, I'm not an author, I'm not a writer. So, hello, that might not be great, but this is a professional writer, and she had a team of editors, I would assume, or an editor at the very least, in order to publish this novel. So maybe between all of them, they could have worked it out. But I feel like in this moment, there is so much emotion, so much sensation, so much exposition. There's so much happening that the actions get buried because they are not clearly stated. And like, I don't need everything to be spelled out for me, but I do think that when you're writing people fighting any kind of fight scene, things do need to be explained clearly. This isn't the only time that this type of thing happened for me, but anytime I felt like lost as to what was going on, I just moved past it. I just resigned myself to the fact that if it was important, then it would probably get brought up again. Because another main issue with this book was the repetition. Oh my God, did this book repeat itself? Not when it mattered, of course, only in moments that were aimed to annoy the reader, obviously. I know that authors have pet phrases that they like to use, but this book truly felt like a Groundhog's Day moment with how relentless the repetition became. Like phrases like, if he noticed, he didn't say anything. If the physician saw, he made no mention of it. If he heard me, he didn't acknowledge it. The smell of salt, the smell of salt, captain of the destriers, the captain of the destriers. Like, just call him Raven. Like, goddamn, if you need to change it up, say the captain, right? Like, just rotate. But no, it like almost like 80% of the time, Elspeth was referring to Raven. She was like the captain of the Destriers, the captain of the Destriers. Holy shit. You do not need to say it 10,000 times. We know who you're talking about. Change it up a bit. Holy crap. Now, do not even get me started on the searing pain up her arm, the splitting pain in her wrist, etc., etc. Like, Gillick uses identical language to describe the exact same sensations for the exact same injuries and the exact same feelings of like the magic burning up her arms and blah 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 multiple times throughout the book, and not even in a way that she kind of like goes back and forth or like cycles through a few of them. It's literally anytime she's describing these things, her broken wrist or the magic flowing through her, it's literally the exact same language and phrases every single time. And she talks about it quite a bit through the book. So it's really annoying. Open a thesaurus once in a while. It ain't gonna hurt. The funniest part is that after Elspeth goes on and on, there's a moment where they are in the chamber, the burned down chamber with the one dark window. And Raven is showing her the secret the stone that they can hide their cards in if they, if infected blood touches it, right? And of course, Elspeth is like, let me do it. I need to know how to do it if the moment ever comes. As if slicing your hand and placing it on a rock is rocket science. Like, holy shit. You literally saw him do it, girl. It's not that hard. It's not a complicated step-by-step process here. Like, you don't need to be walked through the instructions for something like this, but I digress. So Raven, Gillig makes a point to write, Raven grabs her non-injured arm to cut like a little bit at the palm of her hand so that she can touch the stone. And of course his hair falls in front of his brow for the 17th time in the fucking book. And of course, what does Elspeth do? She uses her injured wrist, her injured arm to move the lock of hair out of his face, as if Gillig didn't just spend like a whole paragraph talking about how bad her wrist hurt and how Raven made a point to use her non-injured arm. But of course, she's going to go ahead and use her injured arm to fucking do something like that. Why would you make such a big deal about all of the pain in her wrist and how he grabbed her other wrist just to have her use her injured wrist to move his hair out of his face? This was so inconsistent and stupid, and it was mad annoying because I was already annoyed with this book. I think while Gillig was writing the scene, she had totally forgotten that she had just made a big deal about Elspeth's injured wrist, and she just wanted to make the moment romantic, or she was trolling us. One of the two, I'm not sure. I'm betting on the first one. Now, the last thing I'm going to say about the repetition issue is how she describes Raven's magic over and over again. We get it. He touches the cards, the light disappears. He lets go of the cards, the light returns. Again, Gillig was not creative with this at all. Literally the exact same language was used to describe it every single time throughout the book. And it's really not that hard of an idea to grasp, is it? Like, I didn't think it was all that complicated. You really don't need to keep telling us about Raven's magic. We know what he can do. You've told us 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 times already. And the thing is like, she's never talking about Raven's magic in moments where it was like deemed necessary. If anything, anytime his magic got brought up after the initial moment of it all, it just felt like it was there for filler. So I'm going to go ahead and read you some quotes that I loved or that I hated. Now, let's start off with the ones that I hated. You ready? Our lips collided there among the salt. What does that mean? Like, what does that mean? They're in this, the chamber or whatever, among the salt. Like, hello? It doesn't mean anything. The imagery doesn't mean anything. Like, it was trying to be poetic, but the imagery, it just means nothing. There's nothing there to imagine. Among the salt, girl, be serious. Like, it would have been better if she was like, our lips collided there in the shadow that was cast by the dark window, or something like that. Like, that would have been that would have still been poetic, would have still been pretty, but it would have actually made some fucking sense. Anyway, here we go for the next one. Raven growled into my mouth. Ew. Like, what does that look like? Can somebody please? What does it look like when someone growls into your mouth while they're kissing? Grrr, grrr. What does it mean? Oh, gross. Like, oh, brother, give me a break.
Oh, brother, this guy stinks!
All right, now let's move on to some quotes that I actually did like, because this book wasn't all bad. Okay, so here we go. This is a part where the nightmare is speaking, and he says, "All will be forgotten, save one truth unshaken. What did we do when the children were taken?" Now, this was a great quote. As much as I disliked the majority of this book, the Nightmare is badass. I genuinely loved his character. I was so excited anytime he came into the scene whenever he was talking. Like, I genuinely did appreciate his character. And I think this quote in particular kind of resonates pretty highly right now with the climate of the world right now, the political climate of the world. It hit. It did. I did like that quote. And then we go to a moment where the little boy that was found to be infected during market day, he's running to save his family, right? So the quote is, his footfalls sounded like bird wings as he fled through the trees. This was a great simile. Loved it. The imagery was there for me. I could actually picture the sound that his like little footsteps made as he was running through the forest. And I thoroughly enjoyed that. I did. I thought that was a great simile. Now, I actually don't have a lot of criticisms for the last like 30% of this book. I thought the writing was gritty and strong, and the tone became much darker, which I felt was very appropriate for this novel. It felt more adult. I can't remember if this is young adult or not. I'll have to look into that. But either way, I do think that the last 30% of the book really got a lot stronger than the first 70% of it. It felt like Gillig finally got to the point where she was able to trust her audience and was ready to get into the meat of it all. I just wish she had done it from the start, like I don't understand how you can come up with such great writing at the very end of the book and then have the first 70% be so bad. This book had such a cool concept, and there was so much potential to be so strong and impactful, but most of this book fell flat to me. There were huge plot holes. Like I said, I didn't even fucking touch on those in this review. The characters were all flat, save for Elm and the Nightmare, respectively. And ultimately, this book felt like very directionless until the end. My main criticism can actually just be summed up through the author's own acknowledgement at the end of this book, where she says, I stepped into the book world on tiptoe, and while my steps have become surer, my footprints remain soft. That is exactly how I felt about the writing for this book. It starts out so convoluted and directionless, and as time goes on, confidence begins to emerge. It almost felt like it could have been written by two different people. That is how stark the difference in writing was from the beginning half to the second half. It truly felt like one of those instances in which the author had come up with this idea and had already like pictured the ending before anything else, and then proceeded to write the entire book around the ending that they wanted, because the ending was truly the most well thought out, well proposed part of this book. It was the strongest part. Now, whether you are judging this book on just like pure vibes or actual craft, I think it was weak on both fronts until the end of the book. I will be reading the second book in the duology because, one, I would like the closure, and I'm hoping that it carries the strength of the ending through to the second book. But I guess we'll see, right? I feel like had this been a like 4 or 5 part series, I would be checking out at this point. But because this is only a duology, I don't feel like I have all that much to lose by just finding out where the story goes. So, we'll see. We'll find out. How did you feel about the book? If you've read the book, do you think I'm being too harsh, or do you think that my criticisms were accurate at all? I would love to know your thoughts in the comments. Let me know. Until next time, guys.